All right, we're back with another sci-fi review, and this time it is going to be Caliban's War, Book 2 of the Expanse. Now, I will keep this spoiler-free, simply because I think a lot of people still haven't read this. I know I'm a little bit behind on this series, just this one. I'm behind on a lot of series, but this one specifically is what I'm talking about in this video. As I proceed through this series, I'll likely start doing spoiler-filled reviews and not spoiler-free, because once you're like books 3, 4, it's not like this is like, they're not coming out right now, so spoiler-free is kind of silly. And they would be really short. They'd be like 5 minutes of me saying the same thing. So, Caliban's War, let's talk about it. So right off the bat, a couple of things that this book does really well, in line with what happened in Leviathan Wakes, is it continues the mystery from Leviathan Wakes. So if you've read that book, you know about the proto-molecule. If you've seen the show, you know about it. It's kind of the thing that's happening. Like, that was Leviathan Wakes. That was it waking up. So you don't understand completely what has happened to it, whether it's actually gone or not. And this book opens up immediately with a prologue of a 4-year-old girl, May, who it seems like she's in some kind of like lab of some kind. And whatever the doctor is that she's with, takes her to like a big glass container. And you see like a deformed man that's got like blue coming out of him and like things jutting out of him. So immediately I'm like, oh great, they're experimenting with the proto-molecule. So you immediately have that on your plate, dropped right in your lap, right when you start the book. So of course you have to understand that there's something going on here. Somebody has some kind of like sample or something of the proto-molecule, and let's go from there. We are then immediately introduced to a character, Bobby. She is a new character, and Bobby is a Martian Marine. Now, right off the bat, she is probably the least interesting character that the book has, because she's a Marine and they don't give her a ton of personality right off the bat. She grew on me a little bit later, and that's mostly because of her interactions with the next character that I'm going to talk about, Avasarala, or Avasarala, whichever is the correct way to pronounce that. She is on Ganymede, which is one of these many planets. As I explained and talked about sort of in my Leviathan Wakes review, each planet sort of like divvies out resources. Ganymede helps supply a lot of the galaxy, and it's essentially a standoff between the UN Marines and the Martian Marines. They're both stationed on opposite sides, kind of looking at each other, really just being there, ready for war if needed. They pick up all of a sudden on the radios that, and again, I'm talking like very brief, like introductory to the story elements here. She gets this thing on a radio of the UN Marines are like running at their station. She's just like, what the hell is this? And then you see why, and I'll leave it at that. But you're introduced to her character, and she's the tough, rugged Marine kind of, like, I'm not going to take any shit. And she's not the most interesting at first. She definitely becomes more interesting later. I know I said I was going to talk about Avasarala next, but, I'm going to say Avasarala. Avasarala. I think the show says Avasarala, but I'll talk about her in a second. So we're also introduced to Prax in this book, and he is May's father. And that's basically one of the main storylines of this book, is him trying to find his daughter and his whole quest to go after her. And that sort of brings him into Holden's crew, because he basically gets Holden's crew to help him do this. And that is sort of like where that story takes off. So you've got a couple different plot threads going on. You've got Prax trying to find his daughter. You've got Bobby's story. You've got Holden in the crew, back at it again. And their crew dynamics are so well done. I love Amos, Alex, Naomi. There's such a good cast and crew. And then bringing Prax into the fold gives you kind of that scientist, that smarter, intelligent person in the group where, oh God, I don't even remember his name. I was going to say the medic from the first one, and I can't remember. Shed? It's Shed. We know what happens to Shed. Beyond the crew, which is great because Holden himself isn't the most interesting character, and he's kind of an idiot and hard to root for at times, because he's very like, shoot first, ask questions later. He kind of thinks he's right a lot when he might not be. Honestly, the character that steals this book far and away is Avasarala, because she has no time for anybody's bullshit. She swears like a sailor. She is constantly telling people to fuck off. It's great. And there's just so many laugh out loud lines that I read in this book from her specifically just being around Bobby and interacting with her throughout the book. She talks about James Holden like he is just the biggest dipshit on the planet. Because if you remember from Leviathan Wakes, pretty early on there when him and his crew find that Martian labeled thing on that derelict ship, he immediately broadcasts it to the entire freaking universe. Like, I just found an MCRN labeled thing. If we die, it was probably Mars. Like, he completely started an intergalactic war. Like, it's his fault. So Vassaral is talking about him in this book. And at one point, I'm probably going to say it wrong, but at one point, she's talking to somebody else about Jim. She's like, look, Jim is an idiot, but he's not dumb. If he learns what we're doing, he's probably going to broadcast it to the entire galaxy. He's like, never underestimate his capacity to fuck things up. So yeah, Avasarala is great. So characters, top notch in this, really carried by Avasarala. She is fantastic, and I want to see more of her. The pacing of this book is pretty well done too, because you're not just bouncing between Miller and Holden throughout the first book like you were. That sort of has been established. You're still following Holden and his crew, but his crew honestly gets a little bit more time in this book to shine. It's not simply following Holden and everyone else just kind of facilitating his storyline. And then you have Bobby, Prax, and Avasarala. And of course, as most multiple POV stories do, they like intertwine and their stories weave together. And it's done really well. I guess the only real drawback for me, and it wasn't a major one or anything, was I didn't find the storyline quite as compelling overall compared to Leviathan Wakes, because probably it was just so new and mysterious, and I liked the intrigue there. But there's plenty to build on here, and by the end of it, there's even more questions to be answered and more things to uncover. So I'm definitely confident moving forward to books 3 and beyond that it's going to be way more expanded and way more interesting. But like Prax trying to find his daughter wasn't the most interesting thing. Following Bobby initially wasn't the most interesting. But anytime you have Holden and his crew, Amos specifically, because he's hilarious, just dealing with people, I love it. So the dialogue, the pacing were great. The plot, somewhat lesser than Leviathan Wakes, but good overall. But since I am going to keep this spoiler-free, I don't want to say too much more. It's definitely good. I like introducing new characters to the world, and I'm sure they're going to continue doing that as the plot develops and as the story expands, because it is a pretty large book series. So I fully expect to not only follow Holden and his crew, but continue to add more people either directly to his crew or around him. You get more from the OPA in this book and Fred. There's just a lot of things that are being built up still because there's so much ground to cover. And some of the ramifications from book 1 to book 2 are still being dealt with. And now things happen in book 2 that, things are going to get pretty crazy pretty quickly. And I'm excited to continue. So I did like it a lot overall. Looking forward to book 3. And yeah, that's where I'm going to wrap that one up. I'm going to catch up on the show too, which apparently is through about the mid part of season 3 is the conclusion of this book. So I'm going to catch up on that. And then after I read book 3, I'll catch up on the series as well. So that's going to do it, guys. Until next time.